would love to introduce to the podcast the wonderful Erin Nestico. Thank you so much for joining me today, Erin.
Oh, well, thank you, Karleigh, for having me on.
I'm so pumped for this conversation. And we talked about this before in our pre-pod chat, but I'm already kicking myself because I didn't record that because we already had some really great conversation going in there. So, but before we get started, let's talk about you. Who are you? What do you do? And we'll go from there.
Okay, well, yes, I am a mom of 4 kids, but my whole background was surviving a domestic violence relationship that started as a teen with dating abuse when I was just 16, and I stayed in that relationship for 12 years. I married the person even after he had been physically abusing me for 4 years. We got married. We had 2 children, and then we were married for another 6 years, and I did not end up leaving until the time he had beat me so severely, and our oldest daughter, who was 3 at the time, she was awakened in the next room. And I knew then I had to leave. I had 2 girls and I was not going to have them grow up thinking this was how they should be treated, and I did not want them to end up like me. So I did leave, I escaped, I survived, all to the glory of God that I got out of there and got the resources I need when I needed them. But I'm also a former teacher. I was an elementary teacher for 15 years. So after I had gone through my period of, healing, I had went through a normal dating phase of dating, healthy people. I got remarried. And, it was a few years into our marriage, and I knew I had to do something to help other young women not end up like me. And so I resigned from teaching. And so now, instead of teaching, first graders how to read, I am teaching about dating violence. My ministry is called Love Doesn't Destroy, where I, teach about the warning signs of dating violence, healthy and unhealthy relationships, and really just try to empower young women to know that they don't deserve that they deserve better. Because as a young teen myself, I didn't think I deserved better. I just thought this was normal. But I mean, this was also, the late 90s, and it wasn't talked about as much. And so I really want young women to know there's more out there. You don't have to settle for that guy in your hometown. You don't have to be treated like this. And so that's part of what I do. And then along with the fact that I had my 2 girls with my abusive ex-husband, I also speak about surviving those co-parenting years with a toxic ex, because I did that for 13 years, where, I was still having to deal with him, that the cycle of abuse, even though I wasn't there, I was still at his mercy for his moods when we had to communicate with the girls. And that's really hard. And there were so many times where I felt like I was being, re-victimized again by him or his family, or, other people, just because it was just a constant. I couldn't just walk away. I was still tied to this person. And I learned a lot over those 13 years that I like to share with people who are also in that same situation, because it is hard. It's really hard.
Man, I don't even know how to come back from that. Talk about starting off with a bang. My goodness. Oh my gosh, there's so much there. So the thing, I'm trying to gather my thoughts now because my brain's going 100 different directions. You mentioned this word, and we talked about this in the pre-pod chat as well, this concept of revictimization. Let's start there. What does that mean, and how does it affect you?
Well, for me, it was seeming, when somebody knows that, okay, you've left the relationship, you're no longer there. And yes, I was not there in his physical presence to, get beat. It wasn't the constant, but it was still being part of his cycle. And it still, was dealing with that emotional and verbal abuse, and just the threats and intimidation all the time, because that cycle, he was still on that cycle. And sometimes he would act like he was my, best friend. And other times, as soon as I answered the phone, I knew he was like, kind of in a rage, and I was going to have to deal with that. And it just felt like, even though the relationship was over, I was still being, victimized by him. And just, it was just a constant living. I still felt like I was living in fear, because there was always the threat. So I'm going to take you back to court. I'm going to get 50-50. I'm going to, when I wanted to change their pediatrician, I'm going to take you back to court. You don't have the rights to do that. It just was everything, was like clogging through the mud. Because even though I was physically free of him, I wasn't free from that fear that I still held on to. Like, I know, now years later, he had more power over me than I should have let him. But that's a hard cycle and a hard pattern of thinking to break, when you're so used to this person, getting what they want and telling you what to do, and you complying, and, trying to break that cycle. That's hard. And then, there were also the times where, I'm from a small town, and you would hear people and their comments, and, the victim blaming, and his family, and even some of our mutual friends that, then went with his, side and version of the story. And it just feels like, you're getting victimized again. And you're getting blamed for something you didn't do wrong to begin with. And it's really hurtful. And it's hard to deal with mentally. And it just took a lot of time for me to think, okay, I'm not the one at fault. This is not my fault. I'm not to blame.
And it's crazy. And this is what a lot of people like. And the fact that you say that you had to tell yourself and get yourself to believe that it wasn't your fault is the thing that people who haven't gone through it don't understand, because it doesn't make logical sense for us to think that it's our fault for someone else to do something. And that's because when you're in the abusive situation, your brain isn't functioning logically. And so like, that's a message that I harp on all the time, because I'm so sick of hearing people blame victims because they act as if it's just like we chose to walk in there and like, oh, it's like a swinging door, like we just choose to walk right back out. And that's right. Not it. And this might be a little bit of a different direction, but if you're open to talk about it, what really stood out to me, because I was not with him for nearly as long, but I was in my first I was in my first physically aggressive abusive relationship when I was 17. And you said that you started in this relationship when you were 16. How did that evolve from the time of like when you guys met to, what were the warning signs? How did it evolve, for being together as long as you were? I hope that made sense. I worded that.
Oh, no. Yes. Yeah. I completely get what you're saying. And yes, and that's the thing. All those steps were taking place, but I never realized it until after I was out and I got educated on the topic. But then, looking back, it's like, holy cow, I can see all of the steps, because it completely started with the emotional and the verbal abuse. And I think many abusers are smart that way, because if they come out of the gate swinging at us, we're going to know like, hey, something's wrong here. But when it's that slow, insidious, those steps, it ends up taking over and you don't even realize what's happening. For me, it was all played on the point of, well, if you want to go hang out with your friends, you must love them more, and you must not love me as much as I love you. And it was, for me, always trying to prove like, no, I do love you. But he worded it that if I wanted to do anything separate from him, I didn't love him as much. And so, I stopped hanging out with my friends. I didn't run cross country my senior year. And that's how we ended up going to the same college together, because he was constantly feeding me with, we're going to get married, and he was so kind, and he love bombed me at the beginning, told me how wonderful I was. And after repeated rejections, of course, my 16-year-old heart wanted to hear this. So, you're getting fed of how wonderful you are. You're getting these gifts. I'm going to marry you. And so then his control ended up, becoming more readily accessible when we went to college together, because that was the whole thing. Well, if we don't go to college together, we're never going to make it. So I went to the same college he did. And so then, our first 2 years we were in high school. And it was, the emotional and verbal. And it was the spring of our freshman year that he first hit me. And, we had been together 2 years at that point. And then from there, it was everything. But that was the first physical, was 2 years in.
And it's so hard, like having these conversations, like to not get like sucked into your feelings, because that is something that I never ever say to anybody that I know how they feel, because I don't. Like if we lived parallel lives, I still don't know how you feel. You're a different person, different brain. But that is something that hit home for me when you're talking about how like you were together for 2 years and then things escalated. A lot of people don't understand that it's not like they're going to come out swinging. Like, it's not like they start with putting their fist through a wall or connecting with you. They don't start that way. They start small because they have to wear you down enough to make you think you deserve it. And that's the really sick part. Sorry, I'm just trying to like get my thoughts together now. What was the thing? So you mentioned later on that eventually you had children together, and then your 3-year-old was awake in the next room. Essentially, she was conscious for what was happening to you. What did that feel like? Because I know a lot of parents have, or a lot of women specifically, I know men go through it too, but I'm a woman and I from that perspective, they feel like they have to stay to save the kids. So how did that feel for you, if you don't mind talking about that?
Oh, no, yeah. And that's what, I think in the beginning it was always like, I mean, he had never, touched them. I mean, they were so young, they were 3 and 1 at the time that I left. And it was just, I think it was the mom side of me that realized it was, because I know a lot of people have the fear of, I don't want to be the one to break up the family because I'm leaving. But, witnessing domestic violence is so damaging to children. And it was just the mom part of me, that realized when she came out, because I was laid out on the kitchen floor and I thought one of my legs was broke. I mean, he had really gone to town that time. And so he always, before a physical incident, he always threw an object. And when I knew an object would get thrown, I knew what would be happening next. And he had thrown, there was an open box of Ziploc bags on the kitchen counter. He had thrown that, come after me, but the box was open. So when he threw it, baggies went everywhere. And so once he got done and I was on the floor and couldn't move and I was crying, and our 3-year-old came out, she had been watching Dora the Explorer. She came out into the kitchen and she started picking up the baggies and putting them in the box and just said, "What's wrong, mommy?" And it was that moment. I just knew right then, like, they cannot see this anymore. They cannot grow up thinking this is how they should be treated, because I was just I was so overcome with the fact of, I didn't want them to end up like me. I didn't want them to think this is normal. I didn't want them to, then seek out men who treated them the same way, thinking, well, this is just how marriage is, because that's not how marriage should be. And it just, her, just so innocently picking up those baggies and asking me what's wrong, that was just, that sealed the deal. And I had no idea. No idea in my mind how any of it would go, when I would, and I didn't even end up telling anyone until 2 months after that incident. But it was that moment that just knew, we have to leave.
So, man, like, none of this, I don't want to come off like I'm trying to gloss over any of this, because this is all so much and it's so heavy, and unfortunately it's so real. And chances are there's someone listening to this that is potentially in this situation, or they've recently gotten out of this situation, or they're needing to get out of this situation. What would you say to the woman who's at that place where she's like, oh my gosh, I need to get out. Like, I have to figure this out. What would you say to her as far as like making that happen moving forward?
My first thing would be start documenting. I mean, that was the first time. It was then after that beating that I took pictures of myself, because I had never done that before. And I just knew I'm going to have to tell people what's happening. So that was the first thing I did, is I took pictures of my injuries. And I just think documentation can be so important. And I had to hide that documentation. Like, I sent it and, saved it with my school where I was working. I was a teacher then. But I would definitely start with documentation. And then for me, I had to find the support system to help me. I never would have been able to do it alone. So whether that is someone reaching out to, someone you can trust, or contacting your local agency, like for us, it's called the Victims Assistance Center. But you need support, because no matter how much you want to get out, going at it alone can be very overwhelming, so whether that's friends or family or a domestic violence agency, I just feel like you need that support, because their mind games are so strong that if I had not had the support of the people that, helped me to get out, I would have gone back in an instant. I mean, and I know the statistic is it usually takes women 7 times to leave before they're successful. It was 2 times for me. I did leave once. He was crying, a promise to change. I went back like 3 days later. And I was only there like 2 days, and then I left for good. And so I can see, and that was with me having, a very good support system. So I can see if someone, tries to go at that alone, how easily they just entangle you back in with those promises to change. And that's what I would tell people. The other thing is, they're not going to change. Like, I know I wanted to give him the benefit of the doubt so much. I had this fairy tale idea that he would admit what he had done, that he would want to seek help. And that's the time he did get me back. He had promised, yep, I'm going to get help. I'm going to see someone. And then when I went back, he was very adamant. Well, I'm not going to see anyone. I can fix this myself. I'll just stop this. And it's no, unless they can admit, what they have done, like verbalize it, like, I hit you, you know what I mean? And then they're willing to go to like a batterers program. They're not going to change.
And that's something that really needs to hit home, because a lot of the times we like to think that our situation is special, and that our person is special, and that we have a very special ability to not be the statistic. Well, that's great for her, but well, you don't know me. I could change. I could get him to change. You don't know. And it's like, it's really hard to accept that it just ain't gonna happen. I was watching a video by Mental Healness. I talk about him all the time. He's a self-aware narcissist who now helps women, who has gone to therapy, and he's working on healing, and now he helps women and men understand from the narcissist side what's going on in their brain. And he did this podcast episode where he was talking about, how do you know if they're actually going to change? And the thing that stood out to me is, he said, if they're truly going to change, they're willing to make that change whether or not you're there. Like, even if you decide to leave, they're going to continue going to therapy. If you decide to leave, they're going to continue getting help whether or not you come back. And that is how you know that they've changed. That is how you know that they've gotten healthy. And that's the thing. If you want to believe that your person is different and that your person is special, fine, believe that. But you need to walk away. And if they go, well, fine, you're leaving, I'm not going to change, they were never going to change to begin with. And that was like, I think I knew that on some level, but hearing it come from someone who had been in that place, it was just like that's so true. So true.
Yes, especially like if you have kids together. I feel that somebody who actually is going to want to change is going to realize, like, wow, I have issues I need to work on, and I need to get better even for my children. Even if this marriage, doesn't end up reconciling, I need to be a better person for my children. But I mean, that was something my ex never did. He never, to this day, 27 years later, after we started dating, he still doesn't see that he is, has a problem. And it's just, they should want to be the healthiest version of themselves to be the best father they can be. And that just doesn't happen, unfortunately, so many times.
And that's a horrible thing to get caught up into, because I know that I do this as well, because it's like, man, they should care. I don't understand how they don't care. Like, as a parent, I don't understand how a parent could genuinely not care about their kids. Like, I don't understand how someone could not want to get better and to heal or just show up for their kids. Like, it blows my mind. And we can get so caught up in the shoulds that we create this fantasy in our mind of like, well, they should change, so I'm going to stay to make them change. Because somewhere in our mind, we convince ourselves that if we stay long enough, that if we put up with it enough, that if we get hit enough, that one day they're going to magically see the light and go, oh my gosh, you're right. All this time I'm a douche and I need to go get help. Like, I'm making light of it, but I know this is a really heavy situation, but I know I was there on more than one occasion. I stayed in every relationship I was in for way too long. I'm so grateful that I'm alive right now, because it's like, I look back and I did not make smart decisions at all because of where my brain was. This is not victim blaming or judgment, by the way, but I have to take responsibility for looking back and going, okay, I see what I did then, and I'm going to change what I do moving forward.
And that's, yeah, I mean, for me, and I think, you know, for other people too that I have met as well, we think that we can love it out of them. That if we can be the good enough partner, if we can keep the house clean enough, we can make the meals that he likes, that we're going to love them into this better version of themselves. But it's like, that is never, as much as we want to think it. And I mean, that wasn't even something, it wasn't like I consciously thought, you know, I need to love him more, but I know that was what was going on in my brain, that if I could just keep him happy, you know, and do the dutiful wife things enough to, you know, keep him happy, that he would change. And I mean, you're just running, you are a hamster in a wheel at that point, because that's just never, it's never going to make them change.
And it sucks. Like, that hurts. Accepting that there's nothing that you can do to change the situation, I think, is something that, at least for me personally, and some women that I've talked to, is that realization and acceptance involves its own grieving process all on its own. Because it's like accepting that there's nothing that you can do. You believed for so long that you could, and you have to grieve the fact that there's nothing you can do. And you have to grieve the future that you wanted together. You have to like process through these things. And it's not easy at all.
No, I mean, and that's what I felt like. I even had to grieve the years that I lost to him, because those are all years I could never get back. You know what I mean? And that was, you know, my late teens, all of my 20s. And I went through a big grieving process of, you know, dealing with the regret and, you know, the fact that I decided to stay. And yes, I said, yes, I'll marry you, to the person who had been, I mean, when he proposed, he had been hitting me for 3 years. Like, you know, I did do that. And so there was the grieving of, you know, just that lost time of my life.
And that, and the lost time. And then there is that, like, you do feel guilty. There's so much guilt on survivors, like, because we feel guilty because we did go back. We feel guilty and broken because, you know, we did say yes to an abuser. Like, we chose to show up, and it's hard. And that is something that I have found specifically for me, not specifically, but especially like for me in my case that I've had to work through, is letting go of that guilt. So let's go into kind of to what you do now as far as sharing about dating violence and red flags to look for, how to avoid that. What's the number one thing that you want people to understand, whether they are a teenager, young adult?
I want, yes, no matter where you are in life, is that you are worth more than just settling for someone. That I think the biggest thing is that I thought my worth was determined by whether or not I was in a relationship. And that I think we all need, and I, you know, what I would love for, you know, teens and young adults to know is that you are worthy just as you are. You know, your strengths, your gifts, your talents, your purpose, the things you're doing, you are worthy. You have value just by yourself. That relationship is not going to make you a more valuable person or a more worthy person, because I just think that was the mindset I had, was that I had low self-esteem, and I just thought, okay, well, I'm really, you know, not worth much, and I'm not important. And then, but it was like, oh, but if I have a boyfriend, you know what I mean? I felt that was going to up my worth and value, and that people would care about me more. And see, like, what the sick, twisted part of that is that in our small high school, he was one of the most popular people. And I was shy, I was quiet. And so I had that thought. And then when I started dating him, people started to talk to me. People started to notice me because he was part of the in crowd. So all these people that had never paid me any attention, suddenly started talking to me. And this was really summed up perfectly in our school for homecoming. Every year, freshmen to seniors would get nominated to be homecoming king, queen, prince, princess. I had never been nominated my freshman, my sophomore, my junior year, but he had always been nominated every single year. And sure enough, our senior year, after we had been dating, I was nominated. And so that it like reinforced, even though my inside beliefs were wrong, it reinforced that belief like, wow, I'm a somebody now. You know what I mean? Because I had never been nominated before. And it just fed that wrong thinking. And I just want people to, I'm so desperate for them to know that you are just so worthy. You need to find someone that's going to enhance your life, that makes it enjoyable. And just know that whether or not you're single or you're dating or you're engaged, that, your worth and value is not tied to that person or the lack thereof a person, that you're just you and you're awesome by yourself.
Yes, and amen. Oh my gosh. And this is where there are words. It's the realization that our stories are not nearly as unique as it feels like they are. Only not to take away from like we as ourselves unique, but when it comes to like being in abusive relationships, because that's exactly how it went when I was 17 and I got with my boyfriend. Except he was 18, so he was no longer in high school. So I was like the one that was dating the older. He wasn't even a year older than me, but whatever. And he, at the time, I thought he was super attractive, and I had no problem posting on social media. MySpace was the thing back then. So I would post all those pictures, right? It makes me like, even thinking about that makes me feel so old. Like putting it all over MySpace, and I had pictures like in my binder of me and my boyfriend. And I remember the popular girls in school coming up to me, and they asked me how I got someone so hot. And one, I didn't even realize that was like an insult. It's just like, well, thanks, jerk. But I was just like, oh, like I'm getting noticed now. And prior to that, I had lost, not in a healthy way, but I had lost over, I think it was like 60, 70 pounds, something like that. So I had lost a bunch of weight and I was looking really good. But my self-esteem was right back to that point when I was a morbidly obese, preteen. And I was getting all this attention and I was like, oh my gosh, I don't want to lose them. Like, I don't want to lose this. Like, I feel valid. And I remember when there was something that happened, I think it was like the second or third time that my choice didn't matter in the situation. And I came to school the next day and I was in so much pain. I could hardly move. Like I couldn't even sit down because I was like, my body was just so wrecked. It hurt so bad. And everyone asked me if I was okay. And I was just like, oh, well, we just got a little crazy that last night. No big deal. Like, oh, we're the cool kinky thing. And because I did not want anyone to know what had actually happened. But there was such a status to it. I didn't realize it at the time as far as status, but I was just like, man, I was rejected for so long that I thought that this was the price to pay, because in my head, I was still fat and I was still ugly. And I was like, this is the price to pay to being with someone attractive. I'm shooting above my pay grade here. I'm going above what I deserve. So I just have to put up with it. And that's why I love that you brought up worth, because that's everything to me, is realizing that you do deserve more and that you're worthy of more and that you don't have to settle for that. And you can demand more of life. You can demand more of people and you don't have to stay. But when we are in this place where we feel so low, we don't believe that we're worthy or deserving of more, which is how they slip in. And then that's how they gain our power. It's not that they took our power away, but they put it over in a corner and they put blinders on. They're like, no, it's not there. It's not there. You can't have it. How are you? No one's going to ever want to put up with you. Why would anyone want that? No one's ever, do you imagine, do you see how much work you are? No one's going to, all of these things. And so we reach this place where it's like, shoot, I have to put up with this. This just is. And it's so heartbreaking to like, because I just imagine my 17-year-old self. My sister just turned 18. She's about to graduate high school. And I just look at her and it's like, man, at her age, I genuinely believed that I was just garbage. And I put up with so much. And I would not want that on anybody. But because I felt that way, I know that there are so many that feel that way. And it hurts my soul.
Yes, it is. And I mean, and that's what, I don't know, how you feel with this part, but I was a people pleaser. And it goes back to that whole, the status and the people paying attention, because it was, people were always coming up to me, oh, you're so lucky. Wow, I can't believe you guys are together. He's so great. You're so lucky. And I mean, when you hear that from so many people again and again and again, and then it was like, okay, we have this fake persona, to the world, and everybody thinks I should be so grateful to be with him. It just fed more that I can't break these people, the illusion people have of us.
Mm-hmm.
And that people pleasing part just really fed into that, and it just made me not want to tell anybody what the truth was, because I didn't want to disappoint them.
And that's the message here, that message right there is what I'm so passionate about, and what I want more people to understand is, it's not, we don't stay because we enjoy being abused. We stay because we think it's what we deserve. Like, we think that's what love is. We think that that's normal because that's what we knew. Like, we live, and I was talking on an IG live about this morning. Like, we live in a society that glorifies manipulation and gaslighting and, anger problem. Like, it's seen as, well, the boy's mean to you because he likes you. And, oh, it's
right.
just a joke. Get over it. And all of these things. And yet and then when survivors do speak up, they're like, oh, you should have just left. Why'd you stay? And it's like, well, I'm sorry. You've been telling me my entire life that when a boy's mean to me, he likes me. Like, you've been telling me my entire life that this is normal and this is okay. And even like, no one can watch movies with me anymore. I'm horrible to watch movies with, because I pick them apart and I'm like, oh, that's manipulation. That's gaslighting. Holy crap. Is he really doing the reaction bit right now? Are you flipping kidding me? I am horrible. Don't watch movies with me. It's horrific and it's not fun. I ruin them. And I want people to understand that the reason that we stay is because our brains are wired in the moment to believe that we should. Not because we enjoy being hurt. And it's like, even you said, like, it takes an average of 7 times for someone to leave. That means sometimes it's less and sometimes it's more. Not because we enjoy the pain, but because it's all our brain knows. And I'm so sick of people crapping on victims as if we deserve it because we didn't know any better. Like, that's as if saying that it's akin to looking at a 10-year-old who's in an abusive household going, well, just leave. What's a 10-year-old? Like, what? Their brain is not wired enough to understand or mature enough to take that next step. I know it's a little bit different. That's a sweeping generalization, but for the sake of the illustration, like, it's our brains are wired to think certain things are normal. And if you think certain things are normal, it's just going to keep getting solidified until you break the cycle. And if no one's there to break the cycle, it's just going to keep going.
Yes. I mean, and that's the thing, when I was dating him, like I said, in the 90s, I think people do talk about it more. I mean, dating violence wasn't even a word in my vocabulary. And that's what so much of like what I put on Love Doesn't Destroy is, I want, the teens or young adults or even the parents of the teens to know that, no, your partner should not be cutting you off from your friends. That's not normal. Your partner should not be telling you you have to give up the sports that you like. That is not normal, because that's the thing. If we get into this first serious relationship and they say that, if we don't have any frame of reference that, no, that's not right, you know what I mean, then we just often will go along with it. And just knowing, like, that love bombing. I mean, I didn't know the term love bombing, I mean, until just very recently, but it's like, that intensity that they often move with, and lavishing you with gifts so quickly, or upping the text messages to, I'm going to marry you, 2 times, after your second date. That's not normal. And that's what, with my page, I just want people, to come and see that, okay, there's something wrong if my partner is acting this way, just to give them that different frame of reference to say, no, a healthy relationship looks like this, unhealthy looks like this. Because we don't know unless we teach them.
And it's not talked about. And that's why I love what you're doing, because people need to understand that. And that's like something I'm really passionate about, is I want to get into schools and I want to start like talking about this. Because I remember we had I guess it was 2 days technically in health class in the entirety of my my K through 12 education. We had 2 days talking about abusive relationships. And the only reason it was 2 days is because we watched a movie that had Candace Cameron Bure in it, where she's a victim of an abusive relationship. And the only reason it was 2 days is because we couldn't finish the movie in 1 day. And the rest of it was only focused on physical abuse. And basically all we learned from it was, if they punch you, you shouldn't say. And it's like, okay, well, that's great. I mean, I appreciate the common sense approach you're working with here, but no one walks up to someone and punches them in the face and says, hey, I love you, let's go out. No, right. Like we, as a society, we have to learn. As a mother of a son, a lot of people want to crap on me and talk like I'm blaming men for everything. I'm raising a man, thank you very much. And I know he has a lot more self-control than a lot of the grown men in my life, for the record. He's 7-year-old on the autism spectrum, and he's already winning ahead of a lot of people. And so it's like, we've got to do better. We've got to educate. We have to teach what consent is and understand what love really is. We have to teach boys, because usually, in the majority of the time, not in every situation, I don't want anyone coming after me, but a majority of the time in physical abusive relationships, it's usually a man being the abuser and the woman being the victim. Not always, but in most cases. And I think a lot of this has to do with the fact that we hammer into boys so young. Boys will be boys. If they're mean, if you like her, be mean to her, and you're not allowed to have feelings. If you say you like somebody, we're going to crap on you. The only way to communicate your feelings is through aggression. Right. And we have to change. We have to change from the bottom up. That's the only way it's going to change. And unfortunately, no one's going to come and do it for us. Like, we have to be the person to speak up and do it. We need to change how we educate our kids. We need to change the situations that they're in. And for the love of God, we need to start teaching kids, boys, the she's, the they's, the he's, whatever, that they are inherently worthy, period. And they don't have to earn it. I don't care whatever your beliefs are. I don't care whatever, think homeschooling, public schooling, any of that, wherever you are, whatever you believe, we've got to do better. We've got to start teaching kids, people, humans, of their inherent worth. Because if we don't, this is only going to continue. Because I can guarantee you, anyone who truly believes that they are worthy and deserving of more will not stay in an abusive relationship. And that is why they come at you and they attack you and they pull that away first and foremost. Because then you feel like you've lost and that you can't go anywhere and that they're your savior because they're the only one who's going to ever deal with you.
Right. Oh, yeah. Because that was told to me so many times, no one else is ever going to want you. You know what I mean? Like, you're lucky you have me, because otherwise you'd be alone. And yes, like what you said, like with the schools, that's what so many schools have, the drug prevention programs. And like, I think even parents know, okay, I got to teach my kids about, cigarettes and the dangers of alcohol and drinking with driving. It's like, I personally feel relationships and dating violence, it has to be right up. It is just as important as all those other ones.
Mm-hmm. And I got into a, what I will call, heated debate. Because I was coming with facts, the other person was not. Because I had a very similar conversation. It's like, this needs to be just as important. And they were talking about how, like, understanding substance abuse and chemical and things like that is more important. And I was like, well, oh, great, that's cool. But are you taking into consideration the fact that the brain has its own chemical dependency system? And even if there's no external thing that you're putting in, that you're shooting up, that you're smoking or whatever, that like your brain's going to dump chemicals and it gets addicted to its own chemical dump, and it literally gets addicted to the other person. That's how trauma bonds are formed. Like, okay. And then they stopped responding, and it's like, see, that's why I call it heated debate, because I won. It wasn't an argument. Just putting that out there. But okay. I'm trying to get off my soapbox here. I'm not trying to take over this whole conversation. Sorry. I get heated, but as I want to make sure that we talk about some of the top red flags that you see when it comes to dating violence and in the beginning stages, or even maybe before the relationship starts, like just when you are starting to talk to somebody.
Mhm.
What are things to look for?
Definitely intensity, because I think it's normal, when somebody, you go out on a first date. I mean, that's the thing. And I think, like, when you had mentioned television, movies and TV tend to, make this just fantasy. Oh, they went on their first date and knew they were going to get married. And it's just, no. And so that intensity, like, things should progress at a slow, natural, like, you had fun on your first date. Okay, well, let's try a second date. You know what I mean? We're not setting a wedding date after the first dinner. But people who tend to abuse tend to want to fast track everything. That intensity is there. That love bombing with giving you very extravagant gifts very quickly is a warning sign. Um, and then also the differences, if when you start to notice the difference with how they talk to you and how they are in public compared to how they talk to you and how they are in private. Because I mean, to the public, my boyfriend and then husband, I mean, he would dote on me and, oh, she's wonderful, but then, behind closed doors when we were on our own, it was just ripping me to shreds. You know what I mean, with that criticism. And so, how they treat you in private, it should be matching how with their public. If they're doting on you in public, they should be doing that in private too. And isolation is a huge one. Starting to, if they try to start cutting you off from your other friends, or if you want to hang out with your girlfriends on a Saturday, and that's an issue, that should not be an issue. You know what I mean? Like, even when my husband and I mean, we've been married for 12 years. He golfs, I go do my own thing, like, we do things together, but we're our own people separately, and you need to have that. And if they're trying to take that away from you, big red flag.
That right there needs to just be highlighted, bold, italicized, and slapped everywhere, because that's so important. Because I am someone, I'm now 28 years old, right? I'm grown now. I've been out of all of that for about 4 years, and I still struggle with the concept of things going slowly, because I am so used to things going from 0 to 100 in a matter of hours, not even dates, but a matter of hours. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, we met once, we did really well, we're going to start dating, and then we're going to start talking about all of these like lifelong plans. And holding it back is something that I'm still teaching myself to do 100%. It's so difficult, especially in today's day and age where we want instant gratification, and it is romanticized to have that fairy tale beginning and, oh my gosh, it's so sweet. No, let's take things slow. The other thing that I want to address here, I know we're going to be wrapping up here soon, but so you are someone who has actively been through it, gotten out, and then ended up getting remarried. What was that journey like? Is there anything that you'd be willing to kind of talk about as far as like what you needed to do to get in a place where you could be in a healthy relationship?
Oh, yes, that's a great question. Yes, when I left, it was like a good year and a half, almost 2 years before I even considered dating again. And I really needed that time to heal myself, to think about, just to try to function. You know what I mean? I was just, I was wounded. I was a wreck. There's no other way to say that. I had been through so much that I can't imagine trying to jump back into dating, so quickly. Now, like, where my ex-husband, on the other hand, he had someone living with him before we were even divorced. I mean, he jumped right back in, and it was just like, and then that marriage ended up divorcing as well. And I think there's a lot to be said that, especially, I mean, I had that fear of being alone for so many years, but then I realized it is much better to be alone than to be in an abusive relationship. And I was, I had come to that place where it's like, you know what? No, I'm going to come home to this empty house, and I'm going to sit, I'm going to watch the TV show I want to watch. I'm going to eat the food I want to eat. You know what I mean? I'm not being dictated by this other person. And so I just really think taking time to heal is a big part of what made it successful for me, because if I had tried dating anyone seriously right when I left, I mean, there's no way I would have been giving them a good version of myself, because I had a lot of healing to do. So took time for myself. And then for me, it was that same thing like what you mentioned, because there was a guy I dated, and on paper, he could have been a perfect, next partner, and he wanted to get serious. And it was just for me, it was just like, I could just tell. We went on dates, we'd go on some more. He wanted to meet my kids, and I was just like, no, you know what I mean? It just wasn't, I didn't want to go there. And I knew that, you know what, no, as painful as it was to say, like, no, because it was like, oh my goodness, is this my only other chance at a long, relationship? I had to get over that for myself and just be like, no, something's not right with this, and I ended it. And so then, what I was doing in my, late 20s, early 30s is I was dating for the first time, like, really dating, like what most people try to do in their teens and 20s, just go on one date and then, maybe talk to them again, but go on a date with another person, like just trying not to think like, oh, I'm going to marry you, instantly after that first date. And then when I did go on the first date with my husband, and then we had, gone on the next date, and I knew just by the questions he asked me, that he wanted to help me to get better. He did not run, at the first sign when he had said, well, why are you divorced? And, I kind of didn't come right out and, say things right to begin with. But, as we talked, we, slowly built up to that. And, he didn't run. And he helped me, to gain my, the trust back. And I did go to counseling. I think that was a big part of it, because I know there's stuff I had to heal from. I couldn't do that on my own. And so, learning to trust again, that was that took a lot of time. But he was patient with it. And I think when you're, if you've come out of an abusive relationship and the person you're with, and they're just like, oh, like your past is way too much for me, then you know what I mean? That's not going to be the person for you, because the person for you is going to be able to handle all the things you're dealing with, and they're going to want you to get past it, to be the best version of yourself, and they're going to help you get there. So if they get scared of that, then, that's a sign like, okay, I'm going to keep, looking around here.
I love that you took the time to really emphasize that you spent time on your own before even trying. And that was like, for me, 100% is a mistake that I made. I was so scared of being alone. I didn't know how to function without the validation from another person. Like literally the day that I was kicked out is the day that I got on a dating app. And I was like, I think in a matter of a month, I think I went out on like 10 dates. I was a mess. I don't understand how any of them happened to like, I mean, none of them successfully went anywhere, but like I went on multiple dates, and I look back and it's like, they were clearly as much of a mess as I was. Cause there's no way that two super toxic, broken, like could actually get through to this point. And because I know like there are generally people go kind of one of two ways. They go kind of like me, where they're like, they jump right into dating because they don't know how to be alone. And or they go the opposite direction, where they're like, I'm not doing this. I'm not saying like one or the other, there's no judging or whatever, but we have to like be careful that we don't go from one extreme to the other, versus, one is, oh my gosh, I need a man, to, oh my gosh, men are all horrible and I hate all of them. It's working towards healing in the middle. But the thing that I do say all the time is, please take time to heal. Do as I say, not what I did. Learn from my mistakes. Like oh my gosh. And then I kind of started my healing journey, and I stopped dating. And then I, met this dude that I worked with, and then it ended up like not going, like it's just like, take the time to heal. It's okay. You don't need to find your value in someone else. And being alone is one of the most terrifying things that I ever did, because I was so scared to be with my own thoughts. I had no one else to take care of. I mean, I had my son, but I had no one else I had no one else's dreams to foster. I had no one else's like life to manage. And I struggled with that, because I was like, shoot, now I have to face my own demons, and I have to face my own thoughts, and I have to choose healing. And if I could go back and change, I wouldn't, because I got to where I am now, no regrets, whatever, all that. But if I could, if I wanted to, it would just be to have tell myself to wait and be okay. Because now, I mean, and I am not saying that I'm fully healed. Like this is a journey, and life is going to do what life's going to do. There's going to be ups and downs, but now I have never been so happy in my singleness. Do I get lonely? Yes, I get lonely. Is there times where I feel some kind of way and I wish I had somebody to come take care of the feeling some kind of way? Yes. But now I know my worth. I know my energy. I know my time is valuable. Like I can always make $20, but I'm never going to get my time back. Like, I don't want to waste an hour with someone and have it be wasted. It's like, nope, I'm good. I'm out. Oh, are you giving me really weird energy? Nope, I'm good. Oh, are you mocking? Nope, like I'm out. And now I'm so set in my singleness. It's like, there's going to come a day where I'm going to need to like let someone in. But right now it's like, I went so far from being so needing someone else to now I'm so comfortable and I am okay. Because like you said, it's so much better to be lonely. It's better to be lonely on your own than to be lonely in an abusive relationship, or to even be lonely in a relationship, even if it's not necessarily abusive. Like, even if it's so much better to just take the time and heal than to hurt yourself and potentially hurt other people as you're going through your own healing process, or getting stuck back in the cycle. That's what I did. I was in the cycle from the time I was 12 to 24. It was constant. I think the longest time that I spent single in that time frame is maybe 2 weeks, from the time I was 12 to 24. Mm-hmm. And yeah, no wonder, now that I say that out loud, no wonder I've had such like a boon over the last couple of years of like coming home to myself. It's like, man, I got 10 plus years to make up for. Of course I'm at like a walking 12-year-old boy. Like, now I'm living my childhood now. So
well, it is. I mean, and that's the thing. When I left that relationship, I didn't even know who I was. Like, what did I want to watch? How did I want to decorate the house? What clothes did I want to wear? What did I want to do for free time? Because my whole being was molded into keeping this other person happy. It's like, if somebody had asked me right when I left, like, what do you like to do? I mean, I would have just been like, you know what I mean? I just didn't have a single thought of my own. Everything was based around keeping him happy. And so it is, you got to find, I mean, as cliche as that sounds, you have to like find out who you are, because I didn't know who I was. And so, you got to really just figure out your own person.
And that's nothing to be ashamed of either, because I remember being in that same place. I was like, man, I don't even know what I like. I don't know how I want to dress. I don't know how I want to feel. Like, I didn't know a single thing about myself because I was so tied up in all these other people that I completely lost my own identity. And it wasn't until I was like, okay, you know what? I'm going to try this whole healing thing and we'll see where it goes, where I began to realize, you know what? I am a whole lot weirder than I thought I was. I do like all the nerdy stuff. I do like playing video games. I do like, doing all of these things. And I had to come home to myself, and it took time. Like, if you're in that place right now and you are struggling with coming home to yourself and you feel so lost, that's nothing to be ashamed of. And it is terrifying. But the upside to this is that you get to play and like try anything and everything. If you don't know what you like, try everything. What did you like to do as a kid? Try there. Literally go to the dollar store and get some cheap Play-Doh. Maybe you end up liking doing sculptures and you want to get into clay. Just try, making your grandmother's bread recipe. Do you burn it, but you loved it? Okay, maybe you do cooking and not things with the oven. Like, just try things and play, buy clothes or go to the store, try them on, like, just play and try. And if it doesn't work, it's not a failure. No, it's something off your list. Now you know that that's not the thing for you. But you have to come home and find yourself, or else you're not going to be able to, just like Erin was saying, you're not going to be able to be yourself with someone else. You're not going to be able to have him go to golf and you stay home and do things that you enjoy. Like, you're going to be so lost. Take the time to find you, because then there's going to be, you're going to add so much more to a healthy relationship that way anyway, if you want to look at it like that.
Yeah, definitely.
And the other thing is here, and I know we got to wrap up, but the other thing is that it is 100% okay to be on your own. and also be lonely. Because I've gotten from a lot of people that if they're actively choosing to be single and they're choosing to heal, that they shouldn't feel lonely, which I don't think that's true at all. Like, I am lonely and I'm still not actively dating. Like, it's okay. It's not like an either or thing. Like, you don't have to be desperately single to be lonely. Like, I'm single and I don't know, maybe I'm open. I mean, there's a couple people that it's like they may be able to like get me to go out, but I'm also totally okay with being lonely and waiting. Like, the dating pool, this is where my train of thought was going. I lost it for a second. The dating pool gets a whole lot smaller when you start doing these things. And it's accepting that you're going to be lonely for a longer amount of time. But again, it's so much better to be lonely and waiting for your person than to jump into something that ends up hurting you in the long run. And you end up losing yourself and losing even more time.
Yes.
Man, I feel like I told you I wasn't going to talk as much and I ended up getting on my soapbox. Here we are. But before I let you go, where can everybody find you, get to know you, work with you, to get to know the wonderfulness that is you? Because everybody needs that.
Well, thank you. I am still working on my website, but right now I'm on Instagram at Love Doesn't Destroy, and I have a Facebook page at Love Doesn't Destroy. And yes, coming very soon, www.lovedoesn'tdestroy.org will be a thing, but I'm still working on that.
Well, I will make sure that we get all of those links in the show notes. At the time of this recording, the website isn't up, but as soon as it is, let me know and I'll just go and update it, because people, this is important. This is really, really important, and people need to hear this. So, and make sure y'all listening, take a screenshot of listening, tag Erin, tag me, so then that way we can reshare and thank you, because this message needs to get out there. And sharing to an IG story goes a lot farther than you'd think. The only reason that I'm here doing this podcast is because someone introduced me to a podcast that was shared through an IG story. So it's powerful.
It is. Yes. Yep, we finally got the means to get the word out even more, so that's awesome.
Yes, and amen. Before we close it out, is there any final words you wanted to leave the listeners with?
Just, yes, you are worthy, you are valuable, you deserve so much more. If you're, currently in an abusive relationship, you deserve more, and you're worthy just on your own. And I just hope people just never forget that.
That's like several times you're like, gonna make me cry, and I'm not crying. I just did my makeup. I'm recording like 5 videos today. Can't cry. Making my tears go back in my eyes. Thank you so much, Erin. I appreciate you so much.
Oh, and I appreciate you and what you're doing and sharing our voices. I really appreciate you, Karleigh. So thank you.
Thank you.